The sun beat down mercilessly on the cotton fields of Red River Parish, Louisiana, where Eliza Shaw collapsed between the endless rows. She was twin, tied 3 years old. Her hands bled through the coarse fabric she had wrapped around them at dawn. The overseer's whip had already struck her back twice before midday, but it was not the physical pain that made her knees buckle. It was the words from the big house, delivered by a trembling housemaid with fear in her eyes. Master Alistair Vance had decided that Eliza's -1-year-old daughter would be sold south to the sugar plantations by the week's end. The child's price would settle his gambling debts in Vicksburg. Eliza did not scream. She had learned years before that screaming only invited more suffering. Yet something shattered inside her that day, something that had been straining under pressure for a very long time. She thought of her brother. She thought of Isaiah, who lived in the quarters past the tobacco barns, a man who could not see the world with his eyes, but perceived everything else with a terrifying clarity that unsettled even the white men who owned them. Isaiah, who stood 2 meters and 10 centimeters tall, with shoulders so broad he had to turn sideways to pass through most doorways. Isaiah, blind since birth, yet he moved through the world as if he carried a perfect map within his soul. The other enslaved people whispered about Isaiah Shaw. They said he could hear a falsehood before it ever left a man's lips. P.S. They claimed he knew rain was coming days before the clouds gathered. They said his hands, enormous and scarred from a lifetime of labor, had never been raised against another person in anger, but ever. Yon understood what those hands were capable of, should he ever choose. Master Vance understood it too. That was why he had never directly raised a whip to Isaiah, though he had profited from the man's immense strength for over a decade. Before we continue the story, do not forget to subscribe to the channel and share in the comments which city you are watching from. Stories like this one must never fade from memory. Let us continue. Red River Parish occupied a bend in the Mississippi River where the water carved through fertile soil that had built the fortunes of white men. The parish held thousands of enslaved people, outnumbering the white population nearly 5 to 1. The Vance plantation sprawled across hundreds of acres, with over 200 people held in bondage, cultivating cotton, tobacco, and corn. Alistair Vance had inherited the land from his father and had expanded it significantly, though not through shrewdness or diligence. He expanded it through calculated cruelty, through brutality, and through the sale of human beings whenever his card games turned sour. Vance was a tall man with hair graying at the temples, and features that might have been considered handsome if not for the perpetual meanness lurking behind his eyes. He wore fine clothes ordered from New Orleans, drank imported French wine, and fancied himself a gentleman of culture and refinement. But the enslaved people who worked his land knew the truth. They knew about the women he forced into his bed. They knew about the children he sold without a second thought. They knew about the particular viciousness he reserved for anyone who displayed even a flicker of pride or defiance. Eliza had been born on the Van C plantation. Her mother died bringing Isaiah into the world, and Eliza, just 3 years old at the time, had helped care for her infant brother. She remembered holding him in their cramped quarters, this impossibly large baby who never cried, whose unseeing eyes looked past her even then, yet seemed profoundly aware. As Isaiah grew, so did the mystery surrounding him. By age 5, he was taller than children twice his age. By 10, he was performing the work of a grown man. By 15, he was the strongest person on the plantation, enslaved or free, and his blindness seemed less a disability and more an entirely different way of perceiving the world. White doctors who examined Isaiah labeled his condition congenital blindness, likely caused by complications at birth, but the enslaved community held its own understanding. The elder women who remembered fragments of stories from across the ocean said Isaiah had been touched by something beyond this world, marked for a purpose. They said his ancestors walked beside him, guiding his steps. Whether any of that was true mattered little to the daily reality of life in bondage. What mattered was that Isaiah could navigate the entire plantation grounds without a cane, that he could harness a mule team by listening to their breathing, that he could split fence posts with an accuracy that seemed impossible for him, and who could not see the wood Eliza had protected Isaiah when they were children, but as they grew, the protection began to flow in the opposite direction. Isaiah always seemed to know when his sister was in trouble before she did. He would appear, silent and immense, whenever an overseer grew too rough with her. He never issued threats, never raised his voice, but his mere presence was enough to make most men reconsider their actions. Master Vance had noticed this. Of course, he noticed everything on his land, and he resented it deeply. That resentment had festered for years. Vance, he was the sort of man who fed on the fear and submission of others. Isaiah's quiet strength challenged that need in ways Vance could not fully articulate but felt in his bones. The fact that a blind slave could command such respect, move with such unshakable confidence, and protect his sister without ever uttering a direct word of defiance it gnawed at Vance like a corrosive acid. He looked for opportunities to break Isaiah's spirit, but those opportunities never quite materialized. Isaiah never disobeyed a direct order. He never spoke with disrespect. He simply existed in a way that suggested he was more than what Vance wanted him to be, and that, to Vance, was unforgivable. The decision to sell Eliza's daughter was not primarily about money, though Vance did owe a substantial sum to a planter in Vicksburg. It was about power. It was about reminding everyone on the plantation whose hands held the threads of their lives. And it was about wounding Isaiah through the one person he cherished most. Vance had watched the siblings together. He had seen how Eliza guided Isaiah through unfamiliar spaces, how Isaiah listened for his sister's voice. In a crowd, he understood that the bond between them was the most powerful force in their lives, stronger even than the chains and laws that enslaved them. The evening Eliza learned of her dog, there's fate, she waited for full darkness before making her way to the quarters where Isaiah lived. The stifling heat lingered after sunset, the air thick and heavy with the scent of wood smoke and the distant river. She found her brother sitting outside his small cabin, his face turning toward the sound of her footsteps. He knew her tread as well as he knew the step of every person on the plantation. Before she could speak, he said her name, just that, Eliza, and in his tone, she knew he already understood. "They are taking my baby," she said, her voice flat and emptied of everything but the awful truth. Master Vance is selling her to the sugar country. Isaiah did not move. His large hands rested on his knees, his sightless eyes fixed on nothing and everything. For a long moment, the only sounds were the crickets and distant singing from another cabin. Then he spoke, his voice gentle, which made his words all the more devastating. "I know, I heard them talking this morning when they thought I was working on the far side of the barn." Eliza sank down beside him. She wanted to weep, but the tears would not come. She had cried too much in her lee. Fell already, her body felt parched. "What am I to do? Isaiah, she is only 8 years old. She will not survive the sugar fields. You know what happens to children there." They both knew. Everyone knew. The sugar plantations of lower Louisiana were death sentences. The labor was so brutal, the conditions so horrific, that enslaved people survived an average of 7 years after arrival. Children lasted even less. The grinding season meant endless work, with the constant dangers of boiling vats and crushing machinery. Eliza's daughter, a small girl named Lily who loved to sing and call, collected wildflowers in stolen moments, would be gone within 2 years if she survived that long. Isaiah turned his head slightly, as if observing something in the middle distance only he could perceive. "What do you wish for me to do?" he asked. The question hung between them, heavy with implication. Eliza knew what she wanted. She wanted her brother to walk up to the big house, to take Alistair Vance by the throat to end the man. Destroying their family, she wanted violent justice. And she hated herself for that desire because she knew the consequence. Even if Isaiah succeeded, even if he killed Vance, the white men would come, the law would come. They would make an example that would reverberate across every plantation in the state. Isaiah would die, and likely Liz, A2, and Lily regardless, and dozens of others. Besides, for white society could never permit an enslaved person to strike back against a master, no matter the provocation. I want my cheat. Load safe, Eliza finally said, but I do not see how that is possible in this world. Isaiah nodded slowly, his expression unreadable in the gloom. I have been pondering this for a long while, he said, not about Lily specifically, but about all of it. About what we are, what they have made us, what we might yet become, and I have been listening. Truly listening to everything Eliza did, not fully comprehend, but she waited. Isaiah often spoken, riddles that later revealed their sense. He continued, his voice low and steady. Master Vance is afraid, not of labor, not of losing money, not even of divine judgment. He fears being seen as weak. Every action he takes springs from that fear. The way he beats people, sells children, looks at me as if he must prove something. He needs every one to believe he is powerful because, in his deepest heart, he knows he is not. He is merely a man who inherited land and people. Without that inheritance, he would be nothing. This was true, and Eliza knew it, but truth did not rescue children from the auction block. That does not help Lily, she said. No, Isaiah agreed, but it tells us what might. You see, a man who must constantly prove his power is a man who can be manipulated through his own pride. He makes mistakes because he cannot resist opportunities to display his strength, and I believe, if we are careful, we may be able to use that. A faint stirring began in Eliza's chest, something that might have been hope or might have been dread. What are you saying? Isaiah reached out and found her hand in the darkness, his touch surprisingly gentle, despite the size and roughness of his fingers. I am saying there are things Master Vance desires more than money. I am saying there are ways to make him reconsider his decisions without ever lifting a hand against him. I am saying that sometimes the strongest action is to survive long enough to find the precise moment. And I feel that moment approaching. He offered no further explanation, and Eliza did not press. She had learned to trust her brother's instincts. Even when she could not follow their logic, they sat together in the dark, two people born into bondage who had, against all odds and laws, refused to let that bondage wholly claim their spirits. Around them, the plantation slept fitfully, white people dreaming and the big house, black people dreaming in the cabins, all trapped within the same cruel system, all performing roles written by history. But history, as Isaiah somehow understood, was not yet finished, and sometimes those who are blind perceive what the sighted completely miss. The next morning arrived with the usual cruel haste. The pre-dawn bell summoned all to labor. Eliza dragged herself from her cabin, her body aching from yesterday's toil and her heart sick with fear for her daughter. She had only days left with Lily, days to memorize her face, her voice, our laughter, days before a piece of her soul was ripped away forever. Yet Isaiah had said something was coming. And in her 23 years, Eliza had learned her brother was almost never wrong. Master Van C. emerged from the big house later that morning, already dressed in his finery despite the building heat. He carried a riding crop, not for riding, but for the effect. He enjoyed the weigh-ins. Levi's tracked its movement with nervous apprehension. He surveyed his domain with satisfaction, watching field hands move through the cotton, hearing axes from the timber crew, smelling food from the key. Chin, all was as it should be. All was under his control. He did not notice Isaiah at first. Isaiah was working near the barn, splitting logs for fence posts. The sound of his axe striking wood carried across the yard in a steady, rhythmic beat that was almost musical. Vance frowned. There was something about that rhythm that unsettled him, something too confident, too measured. He walked toward the barn, his boots crunching on the dry ground. Isaiah heard his approach, of course. He stopped working and turned toward the footsteps, his blind gaze settling just past Vance. At shoulder, his face showed nothing, no fear, no resentment, only patient waiting. "You're Isaiah," Vance stated, though he knew exactly who he was addressing. He wanted to see if the man would correct him, would betray a flicker of pride. "Yes, master," Isaiah replied, his voice neutral and respectful. Vance circled him slowly, studying the man who stood nearly 7 feet tall, his musculature evident even through his worn shirt, his presence seeming to occupy more space than his physical body. "They tell me you're the strongest Negro in Red River Parish. Is that true?" "I can say, master, I only do my work. Can't see a thing. Can you?" "No, master, blind since birth." Vance offered a thin, humorless smile. Must be hard, living in perpetual darkness. Never seeing a sunrise, never seeing a woman's face, never even seeing who stands right in front of you. I almost pity you." Isaiah said nothing, but a subtle stiffening in his posture betrayed a reaction, which Vance noted with satisfaction. Asterisk good. Asterisk, he thought. Asterisk, there is pride there. Pride can be exploited. Pride can be broken. Asterisk. "I'm selling your sister's child," Vance said, watching Isaiah's face intently, taking her south to the sugar country. "The trader comes soon. Do you have any thoughts on that, Isaiah?" For a brief moment, Isaiah's jaw tightened, then, just as quickly, his features smoothed back into that placid mask. "She is your property, master. It is not my place to have thoughts on your decisions." "That's right," Vance said softly. "That is exactly right. You're intelligent enough to grasp how things work. More intelligent than most." He stepped closer, his voice dropping. "But let me be perfectly clear, because I know how attached you are to Eliza. If there is any trouble asterisk, any trouble at all asterisk before that trader leaves, I will sell Eliza as well. And then I will sell you to the worst slave breaker I can find, a man who specializes in beating pride out of uppity Negroes. Do you understand me?" "Yes, master." "Good." Vance turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing. I am hosting a gathering here. After the trader departs, several prominent planters will be visiting, and I enjoy showcasing my operation. I want you present, demonstrating your capabilities despite your affliction. Show them that strength everyone talks about. Make me look impressive in front of my guests. You will do that for me, won't you?" Isaiah's head turned slightly toward the source of Vance's voice. "Yes, mass. Whatever you wish." Vance walked away, satisfied. He had reasserted dominance, issued a threat, and even secured a prop for his upcoming performance of mastery. It never occurred to him that he had just fulfilled Isaiah's prediction from the previous night. He had allowed his pride to dictate his actions. He had created an opportunity because he could not resist the chance to perform his power, and Isaiah, standing in the yard with his axe in hand, his face tilted toward a sun he could not see, permitted himself the faintest shadow of a smile, the smile of a man who has calculated several moves ahead while his opponent still gloats over the last. The following days passed in a state of agonizing suspension. Eliza moved through the motions of work, her hands picking cotton, while her mind remained fastened on her daughter. Lily sensed the looming disaster, as children do, and clung to her mother more tightly. Eliza wished she could explain, could prepare her, but how does one prepare an 8-year-old? For the certain hell of the sugar fields. So she said nothing, only held Lily whenever possible, committing to memory the child's weight, the scent of her hair, the rhythm of her breath. Isaiah continued his labor with his typical quiet efficiency, yet everyone on the plantation sensed a change in him. He moved with a new purpose, as if executing a plan only he could perceive. He spoke with the elders, those who carried knowledge from times before. He lingered near the big house, his preternatural hearing catching fragments of white folks' conversations, and he worked on fence posts with meticulous care, selecting logs of specific dimensions and density, shaping them with a precision that seemed far beyond their mundane purpose. On the eve of the trader's arrival, Isaiah requested an audience with the overseer, a man named Silas Rourke. Rourke was wary enslaved people did not make requests, but his curiosity prevailed. He found Isaiah in the barn, standing amidst the stack of fence posts. "What do you want?" Rourke asked, his hand resting on the pistol at his belt. Isaiah turned toward the voice, begging your pardon, sir. I wish to speak about the master's gathering. He asked me to demonstrate my strength for his visitors. So I was thinking, sir, it might be more impressive why. Proper materials. These posts I've been cutting some weigh over 200 pounds. If Master Vance wished, I could lift them, toss them, perhaps even break one with my bare hands. It would make for a memorable spectacle. For the gentleman, Rourke considered this. He had been instructed to ensure the demonstration was notable, and Isaiah's suggestion would certainly achieve that. Master Vance want you. Breaking his good fence posts. I can cut replacements. Next week, sir, these are surplus. And imagine what those planters would think. Seeing a blind man handle such weight as if it were nothing, it would reflect very well on Master Vance, owning a slave of such unusual capacity. The appeal to Vance's vanity was expertly crafted. Rourke gave a slow nod. Lyons mentioned it to him, but you'd best make it worth his while. Isaiah, the master has spoken of fetching a high price for you, selling you to someone needing brute labor. You want to stay here near your sister, Lyons performed flawlessly. Isaiah dipped his head in a show of submission. Yes, sir, I understand, sir. After Rourke departed, Isaiah ran his hands over the selected posts. To any observe, they were simple lengths of wood, but Isaiah knew each one intimately, its weight, its grain, its points of weakness. He had been preparing, and now the pieces were aligning. That night, Eliza came. To him again, she looked hollowed out by dread. The trader comes at first light, she whispered. Master Vance granted me this last night with Lily, then she is gone. Isaiah drew her into an embrace. She was so small against him, yet she had always been his anchor. She wept silently now, tears soaking into his shirt. Trust me for one more day, he murmured into her hair. Just one more day, Eliza. I know it is an impossible thing to ask, but I need your trust until the gathering is done. Can you grant me that? She pulled back, bewildered. What can you possibly do? The trader comes in the morning. Lily will be gone. Perhaps, Isaiah said, perhaps not. But regardless, I need you to remain strong. I need you to remember that you are more than what they have tried to make you. And I need you to keep Lily calm. Tomorrow, no matter what unfolds, can you do that for me? Though she did not understand, Eliza trusted the profound certainty in her brother's tone. She nodded against his chest. I will try. That is all I ask, Isaiah said gently. Then, so softly she almost missed it, he added, Master Vance believes age. He understands power. But he is about to receive an education. Morning arrived. With a brutal finality, the trader, a man named Josiah Hull, whose business was procuring children for the Deep South, rode up to the Vance house. He was gaunt, with restless hands and eyes that assessed human beings as livestock. Master Vance welcomed him warmly, offering refreshments while they haggled over the price of an 8-year-old girl. Eliza stood in the yard, clutching Lily too. Other enslaved people gathered at a distance, their faces carefully blank, bearing witness to another family's destruction. Lily cried quietly, her face buried in her mother's side. She did not fully comprehend, but she understood enough to be terrified. Isaiah stood apart near the barn, his face oriented toward the scene. High, as large hands were clenched at his sides, the sole outward sign of the fury burning within him. Silas Rourke watched him closely. Hand on his pistol, Vance and Holt emerged from the house. Their transaction complete, Vance had secured his price, enough to cover most of his Vicksburg debt. He wore the smug satisfaction of a man who has profited from evil. He gestured toward Eliza. Bring the girl. Eliza's legs refused to move. She could not take the steps that would deliver her child to the traitor. Others reached to support her, but their touch only made the nightmare more real. This was the end. Then Isaiah spoke, not loudly, but with the clarity that carried across the entire yard. Master Vance, everything froze. An enslaved person did not enter. Rubbed a white man's business. Ever, Vance turned slowly, his face darkening. What did you say, Isaiah? Isaiah took 3 deliberate steps forward, begging your pardon. Master, I wish to remind you of your gathering. I have prepared as you asked. The fence posts are ready for a demonstration that should greatly impress your guests. But given this morning's distress, perhaps it would be better to hold the demonstration now. It would give everyone something else to occupy their minds. And your guest, Mr. Holt, might appreciate seeing what your operation produces. It could be seen as a mark of the quality here. It was masterfully done. Isaiah had offered Vance a stage, a chance to perform his mastery and superiority in front of a witness, all framed as servile consideration. Vance's anger subsided, replaced by that familiar hunger for admiration. Holt, intrigued, remarked, I wouldn't mind seeing this. Heard tales about your blind giant. Be interesting to us. Every fact from fancy. Vance weighed the option. The demonstration was meant for later, but holding it now would serve the same purpose and postpone the messy, emotional scene with Eliza and her weeping child, which was beginning to unsettle even him. The raw grief was casting a pall. Very well, Vance decided. Isaiah, show Mr. Holt what you can do. Rourke, make the arrangements. The overseer organized swiftly. The fence posts Isaiah had prepared were carried into the yard-thick lengths of oak and hickory that would require ordinary men to lift. Isaiah moved among them with confidence, his hands assessing each piece. To the white observers, it appeared a showmanship. To Eliza, it looked like the final steps of a carefully laid plan. This one first, Isaiah said, hefting a post that surely weighed 250 pounds. He raised it overhead with both hands, the effort seeming trivial despite his blindness. The enslaved watchers knew this feat was genuinely extraordinary. The white men were impressed for different reasons. They saw confirmation of their own power to command such capability. Isaiah held the post aloft, then drove one into the soft earth near the barn. He repeated the process with several others, creating a line of upright posts. His movements were fluid, almost dance-like, his unseeing eye seeming to perceive every detail of his creation. Vance, enjoying himself, turned to Holt. Impressive, isn't he? Born blind, yet you'd never guess. Worth every cent. What would a slave like that fetcher? Holt asked, the merchant in him ever calculating. Oh, I'd never sell Isaiah, Vance said, though the threat had hung in the air just yesterday. Far too valuable. But if I did, perhaps 1,800 to 1,000, prime specimen, unique. Never a day's illness. Isaiah completed his arrangement and turned toward the 2 men. Master, he said, for the final demonstration, I would like to attempt something special. I will break one of these posts with my bare hands, but I want you to choose which one, so your guests and Mr. Holt today will know there is no trick. Ari, Vance grinned. Any of them, Isaiah confirmed. That one, Vance said, pointing to the thickest post, nearly a foot in diameter. Break that one. If you can. Isaiah nodded. He approached the chosen post but did not lift it immediately. Instead, He placed both hands upon it, his fingers tracing the grain as if reading a text. The yard fell utterly silent, all washed, white and black alike, caught in the strange tension of the moment. Then Isaiah spoke again, and his voice had transformed. It now carried a resonance that commanded a deeper attention. "Master Vance," he said, still touching the wood, "before I proceed, may I pose a question?" Vance, intrigued, nodded. "Go on. What do you suppose I can do this breakwood that most men could scarcely lift? What makes a man like me so strong?" It was an odd question, Vance considered. "I suppose you were born that way. A quirk of nature, a gift from God, perhaps. Thou, age wasted on a Negro who cannot see." Isaiah smiled, and there was something formidable in that expression. Rourke's hand drifted back toward his pistol. "That is where you are mistaken. Moss." Isaiah said gently, "it is not about being born strong. It is about understanding what strength truly is. You believe strength lies in muscles, power and violence, control and ownership. But you overlook the most important element. And what is that?" Vance asked, a warning agenda in his voice. "Strength," Isaiah stated, "is knowing who you are when every force conspires to tell you that you are nothing. Power is surviving what was designed to destroy you and control." He lifted the massive post with one hand, holding it horizontally like a spear. "Control is He illusion frail men cling to so they may sleep at night." Before anyone could react, Isaiah brought the post down across his knee. The crack of splitting wood echoed like a gunshot. The post broke cleanly in two, but Isaiah did not stop. He took the halves and broke them again and again, reducing solid oak to splinters in mere seconds. His motions were precise, controlled, and terrifying in their efficiency. Finish. He dropped the fragments at Vance's feet and stood calmly, his blind eyes focused on nothing and everything. The silence was absolute. Vance stared at the shattered wood around his boots. His face paled, then flushed. It was not the destruction of the post that shook him. He had demanded that. It was everything else. The words, the authority in that voice, the absolute confidence, and most disturbingly, the unmistakable sense that the balance of power in his own yard had just subtly, irrevocably shifted. Josiah Hull let out a low whistle. "Well, that is something you don't witness every day. Your boy has genuine talent, Vance." But Vance was not listening. He was watching Isaiah and watching the other enslaved. People watch Isaiah. He saw something in their faces that terrified him more than any overt threat, a dawning recognition. They were looking at Isaiah as if he had just revealed a fundamental truth. Not him. Barely performed a feat of strength. "Get back to work," Vance snapped, his voice harsher than intended. "All of you, the show's over." The enslaved people dispersed slowly, their eyes lingering on Isaiah as he turned and walked back toward the barn with that same untroubled stride. Eliza remained frozen, Lily still clinging to her. The child had stopped crying during the spectacle, but now the terrible reality returned. The trader was still here, the sale was still pending. Yet something had altered in Vance's demeanor. He looked at Lily, then at Eliza. Hen toward the barn where Isaiah had vanished. His jaw worked silently as he calculated. He turned abruptly to Hold. "Come back inside. I need to reconsider some particulars." Holt raised an eyebrow but followed. Silas Rourke watched them go. Baffled, Eliza dared not hope, but she felt Lily's grip on her dress loosen slightly. She felt the child's breathing begin to steady. Inside the big house, Vance poured a whiskey. His hands unsteady, Holt waited, his merchant's intuition sensing a shift. "I need to think on this sale," Vance said finally. "That girl's mother is Isaiah's only kin, and Isaiah, you saw him." "I did," Holt agreed, "a remarkable specimen. But I failed to see the connection. You need the money for your Vicksburg debts, do you not?" Vance drank deeply. His pride warred with a new, cold prudence. Isaiah has been docile his entire life. Never a moment of trouble, but if I sever his only familial tie, if I push him paw, to some invisible limit, I cannot predict what he might do. You felt it out there. You saw how the others looked at him. He is still one slave, Holt pointed out, and a blind one. What real harm can he do? It is not the harm he can do alone. Vance said quietly, it is the harm others might do if he gives them a reason. They respect him. I have seen it. A slave humoti. Her slaves follow. That is more dangerous than any physical prowess. The last thing I require, especially before hosting fellow planters, is unrest. If word spread that I could not control my own property. Holt nodded slowly, beginning to comprehend. So you keep the girl as insurance to keep the giant in check. Precisely, Vance said, pouring another drink. I will find the money elsewhere, sell off some less productive hands, or delay the Vicksburg payment. But taking the child now, after that display, it feels like striking a match near gunpowder. It was. Cowardice disguised as strategy, fear parading as wisdom. But Holt did not judge. He dealt in risk assessment. Your loss, he said with a shrug. But I respect a planter who knows age. Is stock well enough to avoid trouble? Most wait until there is bloodshed. Before they recognize they have pressed hard, they settled accounts. Vance paid Holt for his time and trouble, and the trader rode away. Without his human merchandise, Vance stood on his porch, watching the dust settle, feeling strangely manipulated yet unable to pinpoint how. In the yard, the news spread like wildfire. The sale was canceled. Eliza heard it from a weeping housemaid and could not process it. Asterisk canceled. How? Why? Asterisk then she saw Master Vance emerge, issuing curt instructions to Rourke. The overseer approached her, his face carefully neutral. The sale is off. Master changed his mind. You and the girl return to your quarters. You'll begin work in the kitchen house, where he can keep an eye on you. Eliza's knees nearly buckled. Lily looked up, confusion and hesitant hope in her eyes. Mama. Hush, child, Eliza whispered, pulling her close. Just hush. She did not return to her quarters. She went straight to the barn, moving as swiftly as she dared. She found Isaiah sitting on a hay bale, his face turning toward her. Isaiah, she breathed. What did you do? I reminded Master Vance of something he had forgotten. Isaiah said calmly, that fear is a stronger motivator than greed. That reputation is more valuable than coin. That sometimes. The asterisk appearance, asterisk of power is all a man like him truly possesses, and he will protect that appearance at any cost. Eliza sank down beside him, trembling with relief, delayed terror, and a why. Rewind of other emotions. You could have been killed. If he had taken it as a threat. I know, Isaiah said simply. But I also knew he would not, because I understood. And him, Eliza, I have listened to that man for years. I hear the way his voice shifts. When he is genuinely afraid versus when he is merely angry, he is not a fool. He is cruel and proud, but he is not a fool, and he understood exactly what I was communicating out there. What were you communicating? Isaiah was quiet for a moment, his sightless gaze distant. That I am not property in my own mind, that I never have been, regardless of what the law decrees. That my body may be enslaved, but my spirit is not. And that if he pushed me past a certain point, if he took away the only thing in his world I hold dearer, I would cease pretending to be what he requires. I would become something else entirely. And we both know the cost of that. It was the most dangerous declaration possible. Eliza and understood why it had been conveyed through implication, not direct speech. Even a whisper of such thought could mean death. What happens now? She asked. He will watch us more CL. Ostly than ever, he will wait for a misstep. So now, we wait, we work, we keep our heads down, we survive. But something changed today, sister, something vital. Vance now knows there are limits to his power over me. He will not admit it, perhaps not even to himself, but he knows, and that knowledge will make him cautious. Not kind, never kind, but cautious, and in our world, caution is sometimes the best protect. Ion we can hope for. Little Lily appeared in the barn doorway, backlit by the sun. Mama, Uncle Isaiah, are we safe now? Eliza looked at her brother. Isaiah turned his face to Artie, his niece's voice, and smiled a true, unburdened smile. Come here. Lily girl, he said, opening his arms. The child ran to him, and he lifted her easily onto his knee. You are safe for today, he said. That is all anyone in this world can promise. You are safe for today. The days that follow were tense and strange. Master Vance proceeded with his gathering, hosting planters from neighboring parishes. Isaiah performed as instructed, demonstrating his strength and his eerie, competent navigation of the grounds. The guests were impressed, speaking of bloodlines and value, but Vance himself seemed distracted, drinking heavily, his eyes frequently tracking Isaiah with an expression that mingled weariness with something deeper. When a planter from Vicksburg offered a staggering -1 for Isaiah on the spot, Vance refused with a sharpness that ended the conversation. Eliza was moved to the kitchen house, a supposed promotion that everyone recognized as heightened surveillance. Yet life settled into a precarious new rhythm. Lily stayed close to her mother, learning small tasks. The other enslaved people regarded Eliza and Isaiah with a new, quiet respect. Nothing was spoken aloud, but the message from the demonstration had been received by all. The story began to travel, as such stories do, along the hidden networks that connected the enslaved commune. Across plantations, it was embellished in the telling. Some said Isaiah had openly threatened Vance, that he possessed supernatural power. The literal truth was less dramatic but more profound. An enslaved man had forced a master to acknowledge his humanity, however reluctantly, and had, through sheer will and perception, altered the course of events. As weeks turned into months, Vance's fear curdled into a simmering hatred. Unable to break Isaiah's spirit through the demonstrations of strength, he resorted to petty, escalating cruelties, reduced rations, harder labor, and finally, the lash. Isaiah endured the whippings with silent fortitude, his body bearing the wounds, but his spirit remaining, to Vance's furious frustration, unbroken. The violence only solidified Isaiah's quiet authority among the others. They saw his dignity under torture, and it became a silent lesson in resistance. One evening, after a particularly brutal punishment, Eliza found Isaiah near the barn. He is destroying you slowly, she said, her voice thick with anguish. This is the consequence I anticipated, Isaiah replied quietly. Men like Vance cannot let a challenge stand, but understand, Eliza, he does not wish me dead. He wishes me broken. He needs to prove to himself that my spirit can be crushed, that the strength I showed was an anomaly, his need for that proof is what makes him vulnerable. What is the point, then? She cried softly. You saved Lily, but you are sacrificing yourself. Because Lily is alive, he said simply. Because you still have your daughter. Sometimes the price for protecting what we love is measured in our own suffering. It is a price I choose to pay. The conflict reached its climax, not I. An open rebellion, but in a quiet act of defiance that would define Isaiah's legacy. When slave catchers came searching for runaways on Vance's land, Isaiah was part of the search party. Using his extraordinary senses, he found the 3 fugitives. First starving, terrified people hiding in a thicket. He stood at the edge of the brush and did not call out to the searchers. Instead, he spoke softly into the darkness, giving the runaways precise directions to a safer path. He then turned away, giving them time to flee, and reported hearing nothing but dear to the overseer. The fugitives escaped. No one ever knew of Isaiah's role except Eliza, who saw the deep, quiet satisfaction in her brother afterward. You helped them, she said. not as a question. I did. If you were discovered, I will not be, he said calmly. There is no proof. Just 3 runaways who got lucky. He paused, his face tilting upward. Every person who slips the chain is proof this system is not invincible. Every act of resistance, however silent, chips away at the lie that we are meant to be owned. My mother died so I might live. If I can offer that same chance to RS, how could I not? Winter arrived. Vance, increasingly erratic and consumed by his failure to break Isaiah, made a final decision. He would sell Isaiah after all not locally, but to a notorious slave breaker in Georgia, a man whose reputation was for destroying men's souls while leaving their bodies able to work. Vance informed his overseer, but the news slipped out through a sympathetic housemaid who warned Eliza. Desperate, Eliza confronted her brother. Isaiah listened, then nodded. I thought it might come to this. He cannot abide my existence as I am. It can't. Riddicts everything he believes. He took her hands. There might be a way, but if I take this chance, you must promise me something. Promise you will keep Lily safe. Teach her that she posse. Sis inherent worth, that bondage is a condition of the body, not the spirit. Make sure she remembers her uncle believed in a freedom more real than any chain. Can you promise me that? Through tears? Eliza promised on New Year's Eve with the big house glowing from celebration. Isaiah walked alone to the barn. Vance, drunk and brooding, found him there. Tomorrow you go to Georgia. Vance slurred. I wanted you to know. Wanted to see your face. I know, master, Isaiah said. Good, so you understand. Everything ends tomorrow, perhaps. Isaiah, I said quietly, or perhaps you have always misunderstood what I am. Vance laughed harshly. Still proud. We'll see how long that lasts. He turned to leave. Master Vance, Isaiah's voice stopped him. T held a new, profound timbre. I want to thank you. Thank me, Vance sneered, for showing me who I am. Isaiah said simply, you have spent all this time trying to prove I am mere property, and each time you failed. Each time I remained standing, I learned something essential. I learned that I possess a strength you will never comprehend, because I know what it means to endure with dignity, while you know only how to inflict cruelty without courage. The words hung in the frigid air for one fleeting moment. Alistair Vance saw himself reflected in Isaiah's blind gaze, a hollow man whose power derived entirely from a rotten system, a man whose soul was impoverished next to the enslaved giant's unassailable spirit. The moment passed. Rage contorted Vance's features. He raised a hand to strike, but found he could not. Isaiah did not flinch, did not move, merely stood as an immovable monument of resolve. Get away from me, Vance whispered, his voice cracking. He stumbled back toward the house, defeated in a way no ledger could record. Isaiah returned to the quarters. He embraced his sister, holding her as he had when they were children in a world even more impossible than this one. Whatever comes. Tomorrow, he whispered, remember that we survived. Not just in body, but in soul. Remember that, and teach it to Lily T. He stood together as the old year died in the big house. Alistair Vance drank alone, wondering why his victory felt so much like a crushing defeat. The answer, had he the courage to face it, was simple. Isaiah had won, not through escape or rebellion, but by refusing to allow slavery to claim his inner self. He had won by remaining whole. And that victory, invisible to the law but undeniable in the human spirit, was the most dangerous kind. For if one man could do it, others could too. And if enough people remembered their own humanity, the entire edifice of chains and lies would eventually crumble to dust. History would prove Isaiah right. The plantation system would fall. But before that, in the cold darkness, one blind man stood tall, remembering what it meant to be free. Within that memory passed from heart to heart, would outlast every whip, every auction block, every attempt to make people forget their own worth. Isaiah was sent to Georgia. The records are silent on his fate, but perhaps that is fitting. Some stories do not require neat endings. It is enough to know he lived with dignity, protected those he loved, and challenged a system designed to annihilate him, remaining unbroken where it mattered most, and perhaps in ways we cannot measure. He is still winning.